We summoned a spirit, it wants to kill us. When I was 8 years old, I lived with my mom and younger brother in a small apartment on the 20th plus floor. My father had been out of our lives for a long time, since he had disappeared after the divorce. It was just my mom, my brother, and me, and I was used to being home alone most of the time. Mom was often away on her own, my brother was still young, and I had to be alone most of the time. There was nothing wrong with being alone. On the contrary, I felt safe, cozy in my room with books and toys. Sometimes I missed adults, but I quickly learned to cope. However, everything changed when an aunt came into our lives. She and her children, eldest daughter Anastasia, 15, and son Igor, 12, found themselves in our apartment almost without warning. They had been evicted from theirs, and there was no other option but to ask for temporary shelter with us. Mom, as always, could not refuse and took them in without any hesitation. The first day was fun. We were curious about our new neighbors. With my brother and sister, we instantly found a common language, started playing, laughing, discussing everything. And although the apartment seemed a bit cramped for such a company, everyone felt not so bad. But this idyll quickly changed as soon as I began to notice the strange behavior of my aunt's eldest daughter, Anastasia. She was strange. It was hard for me to say exactly what it was about her that alarmed me, but her hobbies, her looks, the way she spoke, all of it made me uneasy. One evening, as everyone sat in the room discussing something, she suddenly suggested a ritual. She told me that it was nothing more than a game, but that she had supposedly found a method on the internet to summon a spirit. At the time, I was incredulous. This kind of thing always seemed like just a fun fiction to me. I thought it was just fashionable hype among teenagers. For the ritual, Anastasia brought a piece of paper and a couple of pencils. She drew a circle on the paper, and in the middle she wrote 2 words, yes and no. Let's all put our fingers on the pencils, she suggested. We laughed, thinking she was just kidding and that it would be a normal kid's trick. My brother and her brother Igor and I leaned over the paper, and to our surprise, the pencils started moving. I couldn't understand how this was possible. It seemed as if they were spinning on their own, as if an invisible force was moving them. At that time I thought it was just a game, a trick, and nobody took it seriously. But as much as we were joking, we sat down and started asking questions to the spirit. We asked things like, "Are you here? Do you have something to tell us? Are you scaring us?" And to all the questions, the pencils did indeed seem to answer, moving toward yes. A strange sensation swept over me. It was both exciting and creepy at the same time. But we all quickly stopped believing what was happening as soon as the game ended. However, events began to unfold quickly. Not even a week later, I started noticing strange things in the apartment. At first, they were slight noises that I couldn't explain. Quiet rustles, as if someone was walking through the rooms when no one was in the house. Sometimes I heard heavy thumps like something falling, but when I went to check, nothing was there. Other things, books, toys, seemed displaced. I began to feel like I wasn't alone. Empty rooms often felt like someone's shadow, like someone was there when no one else was. But it couldn't be true. I convinced myself it was just a fantasy. However, every night when I returned home, I felt more and more anxious. It would have been easy to think I was just nervous, but as the rustles grew louder and the strange occurrences became more and more apparent, I couldn't turn a blind eye. One morning, as we sat at breakfast, I noticed that Auntie looked completely different than usual. She became nervous, looking around as if someone was following her. For the first time I saw something scary in her eyes, not just fright but real panic. She kept moving as if someone was in the room with us. I froze, sensing something was happening. When my mom and brother left, my aunt and I were left alone in the kitchen. Auntie was silent for a long time, sitting still and looking out the window. And then she suddenly asked, "Did you see him too?" I froze, feeling a chill run through my body. Him? Who him? I was horrified. How could she know how I felt? It's not like she and I had talked about it. The second she said those words, I knew I wasn't the only one who felt something wrong. I struggled to say it. "What do you mean? Who is he?" My aunt didn't answer at once. Then she spoke softly. "He is here. He's watching. We have to leave. When my aunt said that he was here, I felt my blood run cold. There was no room for doubt in her voice. She believed what she was saying. And I, too, was beginning to doubt what was happening in our apartment. It was like a sudden realization that everything I was experiencing made sense. But there wasn't time to keep thinking about it. My aunt gave me a worried look, got up from her seat and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't say another word, and I was left standing there alone, stunned. My brain refused to comprehend what was happening, but the feelings that were overwhelming me spoke. A few days later, her family had indeed disappeared. At first we didn't understand what was happening. Auntie Anastasia and Igor simply disappeared, as if vanished into thin air. Mom once said that they had gone to a friend's house, but there was something in her voice that kept me in suspense. My brother and I noticed that they had taken almost all of their things. It was strange to pack up so quickly and leave without saying goodbye. But at the time, I couldn't fully understand what was behind that departure. Maybe at that moment I was still trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that they couldn't be connected to what was happening in the apartment. But every day it became more and more obvious that something was wrong. After they left, my mom and I were alone in the empty apartment. It seemed even stranger now than before. There was a heavy air in the walls, which were still cold and unfriendly. I began to notice that the noises that I had previously recognized as the normal sounds of the house now filled the space with an eerie foreboding. They became louder, more insistent. Strange thuds in the walls, as if someone were trying to get out. Strange rustles outside the doors and windows. It was all suddenly so real. And though I tried not to think about it, the fear grew stronger every day. It seemed to envelope us, keeping us from resting. I tried to forget everything that had happened and focus on the fact that we just had to live, to go on as before. But as soon as I was alone, the dark corners of the apartment seemed to come alive. The fear of sitting in silence became almost physical. I felt there was someone around every corner, someone watching my every move. The loneliness became unbearable, and I felt as if the walls were shrinking, as if something living, inhuman, dwelt in them, and it felt stronger and stronger. But the worst of it was that Mom seemed to feel the same way. I could see it in her eyes when she couldn't stay still for long, when sometimes her gaze became glassy, as if she too was seeing something she couldn't explain. She tried not to show fear, but I could feel her losing confidence more and more. Every now and then she would start talking to herself, whispering something in the dark as if she didn't notice it. I tried to ignore it, but there was something unsettling about her actions. It wasn't long before I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I went to my mom and told her everything. About what we heard at night, how I felt when I was alone, as if we were being chased by someone invisible. I expected her to think I was just scared, that I was imagining some horrors. But to my surprise, she not only listened to me, but most importantly believed me. Her face changed, and I saw something in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just anxiety. It was fear, the realization that there was more going on than we could understand. Mom was silent, not saying a word for a long time. We sat in silence, and I could feel her fear rolling over me like a wave that grows and grows. And then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was firm and determined. "We can't stay here any longer," she said. These words, spoken quietly but confidently, were a revelation to me. I realized that my mother also felt the same terror that I had tried to ignore. She made a decision. We had to leave. She called an agent and put the apartment up for sale, even though I knew there was more to the house than just old walls and furniture. Saying goodbye to the apartment was not what I expected. We didn't go back to normal. We didn't just take off our suitcases and leave like they do in the movies. I remember the last time we closed the door. It wasn't just closing the door. It was saying goodbye to something that haunted us, giving us no peace. I couldn't forget those sounds, those moments of fear when it felt like something was watching us. We walked out, and I looked back one last time at the apartment that had been our home until it became a place of nightmares. Quiet, empty, deserted. Within its walls remained not only the memory of what we had experienced, but something else. It was as if something continued to live within those walls even after we left. We moved, but I couldn't forget the feeling that night when we left the apartment. Something remained outside its door. The very him my aunt had talked about. It all seemed too real to be just a game or a coincidence. And to be honest, ever since then, I'd never been able to shake the idea that something dark continued to inhabit the place where we lived.
Thank you for watching this video. I would appreciate it if you put a like and subscribe to the channel, as most likely this is not the end of the story. Before meeting,